How do you introduce a game that is so dear to you? How do you start talking about one of your favorite games of all time? And how do you properly convey that excitement to an audience who may or may not care what you have to say? You'd think I'd know the answer to these questions by now, but for this particular instance, I really don't want to mess it up. Because the game in question is really special.
Xenoblade Chronicles is a highly revered name by many fans of role-playing games. When I first played this game for myself nearly 5 years ago, I fell in love with it. When I found out an HD remake for the game was being made, it became clear to me to express why I had to talk about it now. Xenoblade Chronicles isn't a hard game for me to talk about. I could talk about this game for hours. But it is a hard game for me to discuss in the right way. I don't want to list features off like I'm reading some boring grocery list. I want to talk about the reasons I found this game to be so special, as well as trying to convince those who may want to consider giving this game a shot some backing to go on. I want to talk about my favorite game for the Nintendo Wii, Xenoblade Chronicles. Number 1. What a Wonderful World. How exactly do you convince an average gamer that they should dedicate the rest of their free time to some insanely long JRPG? Should we have a slow, mundane drip feed of setting and characters? Probably not a good idea. I mean, unless you're making a game specifically for Chris the Fields. Instead, how about showing the players the importance of the world? What makes your setting so much better and cooler than others? How about this?
Long ago, the world was nothing more than an endless sea. Then two great titans came into existence. The Bionis and the Mechonis. The Titans were locked in a timeless battle. Until at last, only their lifeless corpses remained.
I'm in! Sold! Take me away!
Having the location of the game take place on the bodies of monolithic titans is unlike anything I've heard of before or since. It's such a uniquely Xenoblade concept that if anyone else tried to do something remotely similar, it would be so obviously aping the concept. I was captivated by the pitch immediately when it reached my ears, and when I got to play the game for myself, it didn't take long for the game to pull me in. What we have is a very typical but structurally sound setup. We have an establishment of the grander mythology of the world, the ripple effects of the creation myth, and wrapping up with a much more low-key explanation for what we, as an adventuring party, must do now. And it doesn't take long until you get to experience that world for yourself. Xenoblade Chronicles isn't a truly open-world game. It follows more of a similar environment philosophy to games like Borderlands, for example. You get a pretty spacious area to start, and as you progress further into the game, you only get more areas to explore and quest in. But this game still does an excellent job at pushing you back into the world to make new discoveries. Even aspects that often get seen as poor design and archaic RPG tropes are there to help you explore. For example, quests. Some of the most common quest types in the game are kill X number of monsters, or find Y amount of item drops. And usually these quests come in bulk, so if you ever find yourself in a new town, you'll probably soon get the generic quest giver that has 5 or so tasks to complete. On the surface, yes, these are boring MMO fetch quests, but upon fulfilling whatever requirements that are given, the quest will automatically turn itself in and give you the rewards right on the spot. The game just gave you a reason to go out into the world, without you needing to return and halting any momentum you had finding new landmarks and such. They're meant to be completed over time, or perhaps while you're fulfilling the more interesting side quests involving the named NPCs of the world. You'll want to do these quests not always because they are fun, but because the rewards are helpful. The world is dangerous, but at the same time, it's still so inviting. Yes, you will get murked by a level 80 monster in the starting area of the game. It's sort of a rite of passage amongst fans of the series. But if you happen to fall in battle, the game just sets you up at the nearest landmark you discovered. No game over boot to the title screen, nothing you dropped that needs to be picked up. Xenoblade Chronicles just wants you to have a good time. Or maybe you are the kind who dies often. The one who does need a little bit of training to make a lasting confrontation with the enemy. Well then. Number 2. The mechanical rhythm of battle. So I'm not really big on MMOs. Maybe that's just my inner recluse talking, but I've never been truly fond of the concept. I think that's mostly due to how complicated the games can get. There's so many stats and buffs and timers and junk that I get overwhelmed pretty quickly. So I guess that's what's so strange about Xenoblade Chronicles. For all intents and purposes, this is basically just a single-player MMO. You can move most of the characters in real time, but for the most part, battles are automated. Your primary duty is to use your abilities when their cooldown is complete. Sure, you can spam your arts to go for some quick bum rush damage, but if you want to get the most of your abilities, you gotta use them at the right time. In the right place. Take Shulk's famous backslash. Find a way to maneuver behind the enemy, and you can deal significantly more damage than if you used the attack normally. Some characters can inflict status effects that other party members can build off of, to just plow through enemy encounters. The game's cast has a lot of synergy with each other during a fight. Just like with the game itself, everything comes together so neatly that it's hard to think of any flaws. You can dig and find them to be sure. The AI party members can be a bunch of boneheads sometimes, but hey man, they're just trying their best. In fact, there's only one seam I found in this fabric. And even then, it's hard to call it problematic when it's just how the game's built. Despite taking place in real time, the battle structure feels very much turn-based. Attacks don't connect the same way they do in an action game. This is mostly attributed to the fact that any arts you activate will strike as long as you were in the correct position when the button was pressed. In all honesty, this is the most fair for you. If an enemy moves out of the way just because one of your arts takes like 2 seconds to complete the animation, you won't get penalized for it. But on the other end, if an enemy was charging up a super move while you are right next to them, it doesn't matter how far away you back up, you'll still get hit. It's kind of hard to quantify this system as either good or bad when both players and enemies play by the same rules, but it's something I could see throwing off new players regardless. I'd completely understand if someone came up to me saying that the enemy engagement felt a bit loose and awkward. This makes it feel like the attacks on both sides have no impact, which can be unsatisfying on your end and cheap on the enemies, leading you to thoughts like, what more could I have done? Thankfully, the game does offer a mechanic to help counterbalance any frustration that might occur through this design choice. A vision! Shulk has the ability to see into the future. Randomly throughout battles, he will get premonitions of moments yet to come, warnings of the dangers his team faces, enemies that will land a death blow on a precious ally or inflict unfavorable status elements. Using such information, you can then tackle the unfortunate scenario in a multitude of ways before it becomes an irreversible fate. Maybe you want to heal everyone in the party so they can survive the attack. Maybe you want to surround everyone with a barrier to negate the damage they would have taken. Or maybe you focus all your damage on one foe to kill them before they kill you. I'm not gonna lie, there is a lot here, and the game may prove to be difficult to those unwilling to learn the battle system. Although to the surprise of some, even if you aren't an expert, the game can still be very forgiving. You may have noticed in the footage that all of my characters are in the same outfits they start in. People familiar with the JRPG but know little about Xenoblade may ask why I'm even bringing this up at all. But when you change armors in the equipment menu, that is reflected in the aesthetic change of your character. This is usually praised as a wonderful immersion piece in games, a nice reminder of the work you had to go through to get that equipment. But there is a hang-up I have with systems like these. I am an aggressive assailant against aesthetic armor altercations in video games. Low-key, some of my favorite features in other RPGs are fashion equipment slots they can use to determine your character's appearance, without needing to see some Frankenstein's monster of gross armor combinations. This is weirdly enough my favorite thing Xenoblade Chronicles X brought to the series. I would much rather see characters in their canonical designs. I think that's what they look best in. But also, some of the specific armors you can find are aggressively horny. There's a specific build in this game that's commonly referred to as the Naked Dunban, for crying out loud. And yet I was still able to play this game, keeping everyone's canon armor sets for each character. That's a testament to the game more than anything. Not only does it satisfy people like me, who are very picky about character apparel, but even for a normally functioning human being that will play the game as intended, you still don't need the most optimal setup to make your way through the game. You'll be fine if you're not constantly buying new armor at each town you visit. If you're raising your defenses at all, that's all you need to get through the game. Heck, I've already proven you don't need to regularly change your equipment to beat the game. And if you think I could only do this because I'm some fanatic elitist that knows a bunch of underlying mechanics and speedrun tech, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I was able to successfully do this on my first playthrough of this game, which I did blind when I was only 18 years old. Yet I still made it through the entire game in just about 60 hours. Even now, I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Xenoblade's battle mechanics. In fact, you might be surprised how little I actually do know about this game. However, if you do plan on playing the definitive edition for the game, it will include fashion slots for each of the characters. So now you can have the look you want and the stats that matter. So congratulations! It'll be interesting for me to see how much easier the game will be now that I can actually have rising stats for the entire game. On that note, Xenoblade Chronicles also just has an excellently balanced difficulty curve. Never too hard, and never too easy. Just fight the battles you'll naturally come across as you progress in the game, and that should be enough to get you by. If you're having trouble though, there are multiple ways you can get stronger. Of course, you can always fight optional battles to practice your strategies and get stronger. But you can also fulfill those unfinished quests. You can get pretty significant experience boosts just by discovering new landmarks. You can get practically whole levels just by discovering secret areas. You can craft stat gems to slot in your armor for huge bonuses. Or you could, buy better armor. The point I'm trying to make is that you get options while playing this game. You aren't going to be locked out of progress just because there are things you don't know. Every member of the party is playable and functions very differently from each other. That said, I barely ever use them. I have no idea how the heck I'm supposed to play the 6th party member you get. Instead, I just stick to playing as Shulk the whole time. The game doesn't care either. It doesn't matter who you main. As long as they're around for the story, they're available to play as. Party members only leave the group on few exceptions, and they usually aren't too far removed from getting them back. The game just wants you to have a good time. Number 3. Every 30 frames per second, a painting. Now, I've seen a lot of opinions over the years. Yet there are sometimes opinions that upon hearing them, my brain just shuts down to process the utter stupidity of the words I took in. One of those being that Xenoblade Chronicles is an ugly video game. Excuse me? When the Xenoblade Chronicles remake was announced, I've seen a lot of people say they can finally play the game and appreciate it, since it finally looks good. Now, I don't know what kind of baboon-brained idea worked its way into the minds of men, but I feel the need to inform you that Xenoblade Chronicles always looked good. It's one of those games that looks so good that I accidentally forget that it's not already in HD. Okay, sure, putting my facetious antics aside, I do understand where the sentiment is coming from. This game was released on the Wii, the most technically limited video game console of its time. It initially came out in 2010, when the world had been used to HD gaming for years, and flat-screen TVs prevailed in nearly every household. In fact, it would be even later before the game found its way overseas, when the most impressive-looking games of the generation were still releasing. I have no problem saying that Xenoblade Chronicles has nowhere near the same fidelity as the average game release of its generation, let alone the year it released. But feel free to ask anyone what makes a game hold up in terms of visuals. 9 out of 10 dentists who prefer The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker over The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess claim that it's about the art direction that makes something that stands the test of time. How does the game use colors, proportions, animations, and consistency? That makes 1,000 differences that can make up for, or even exceed raw polygon counts. But the one dentist that loves Twilight Princess probably also understands that a game can achieve a more realistic style and still have an interesting art direction, which is probably why the dentist is also a fan of Xenoblade Chronicles. It uses colors so exquisitely that it brings out the vibrancy of each area. Upon first arriving at Satoral Marsh in my first playthrough, I was captivated by the sheer beauty of the moonlit trees and the purple haze clouding the field. Sure, if you look really hard, the imperfections are easy to spot. Look really close at a wall or the clothing on characters, and you'll notice jagged edges or low-resolution textures. But taken in as a whole, the game has a consistent look that is congruent across every hour that is played. Xenoblade Chronicles has a certain uniqueness that even the rest of its series wasn't able to properly recapture in the same way. In fact, despite an HD remake for the game being around the corner, I still prefer the art style of the original game more. It was forced to work around the technical limitations that was afforded to other games of its time. And, well, the results speak for themselves. Xenoblade Chronicles doesn't look good in spite of the Wii. It looks good because of it.
Oh, but Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive has way better character design because the faces can actually be expressive.
Nani to heck? Okay, I know baboon brains must run in your family by this point, but what exactly about the original Xenoblade wasn't expressive? Were you too busy reading the subtitles and not looking at the very good facial animation that had been present in Xenoblade Chronicles since it originally released in Japan since 2010? Do you need a base requirement of Adam's face from Xenoblade 2 Torna before you have a satisfactory quota of facial expression?
I really like you two.
Of course, art by its nature is subjective. What one person might find ugly, another can find captivating. Perhaps you find the new interpretation to be far superior, because you're a coward, because you have a greater affinity for the style. But I do think that it's unfair to completely write off the artistic merit of the original version because of a few technical problems it tried its best to work around. And to me, Xenoblade Chronicles is just one instance where I think that's the case. A game that holds up artistically, and a game I will never grow tired of looking at. Number 4. Are you smarter than a JRPG story writer? Now, you may notice that beyond the first few minutes of the game, I haven't really talked much about the story. Debatably what a JRPG should prioritize the most. That is because Xenoblade Chronicles has my favorite story in any video game of all time. Maybe even my favorite story ever told, period. It has a narrative that will never let you go and never let you down. Now, if you know me, you're very well familiar with my grandiose, hyperbolic statements, but I say with full sincerity that Xenoblade Chronicles is a magnificent work of art that you simply must experience. It may sound like a weird thing if you have limited but still some familiarity with this game. Look down a list of bullet points for what happens in summary, and you may just say, dude, this sounds like any other JRPG I might have played in the last 20 years. But if you forgive what you see as a traditional setup, you'll discover the importance of context. Let's say you're playing this game on your own. You're not remotely aware of the premise besides Shulka's Minato, and that's about it. You'll probably still be able to predict most of the major plot twists this game is going to throw at you, even 30 hours into the game. That was at least my experience when I first played this game for myself. Me even! Chris the Fields! The guy who is horribly bad at speculating what's going to happen by the end of a story. But that doesn't matter. Because for as much as Xenoblade Chronicles is about what happens, it's equally about how it happens. Everyone is characterized so well and naturally develops over the course of the game. Everything that happens unfolds in such an expertly crafted way that despite being a 60-hour-long game, it doesn't feel like it. Just seeing what happens in the way it does is enough. In fact, you might even feel kinda good for figuring it out. You'll inevitably feel smart for doing so. You'll think that this was a story written for babies as you nail down every beat with pinpoint accuracy. And then, hour 31 happens.
Oh my god! What the hell? Huh? Excuse me? No way! This can't be happening! What is going on?
For the entire back half of the story, all of your expectations for how it was playing out get flipped to Antarctica and back so fast that you'll have to get rushed to the ER for the state of shock you're now experiencing. And you'll know what the best part about all of this is? It's that you'll feel so dumb for not realizing sooner. Because even the most crazy, out-of-nowhere revelation in the story was foreshadowed from hour 2 in the game. And you just didn't think it was important enough at the time to pay attention to. Wait a minute. Look at the bread. Look, that's glue. Why is Shulk not eating the bread? What does it mean? Xenoblade Chronicles was already one of my favorite RPGs when I had played it. But when I played it again recently, I realized just how much I love this game. 4 years later, it stuck with me in near complete clarity, while many other games I had played since, I barely even remember at all. Holding its own head high with dignity and grace, it mixes all of its attributes with such harmony that it genuinely blows me away. This isn't just one of my favorite video games in a genre. This is one of my favorite video games of all time, potentially top 5 material for me, maybe even top 3. This is a game I recommend to everyone. Even if you don't like RPGs, this is one game I urge you to play. To me, this is a true example of art in the video game medium. The world is unlike any other I had stepped foot onto. The battle system is so fast and engaging during every fight. The art direction is absolutely stunning for every shot that is framed. The story was genuinely fantastic from every character to every scene they were in. And there is so much more to this game that I want to talk about too. Like the soundtrack. Holy crap, it's incredible! But perhaps I should stop there. After all, I made this video to convince people to give this game a chance if they hadn't already. And it would be hypocritical of me to spoil the experience when I had the opportunity to go in relatively blind and be absolutely stunned by the game. So please, do give yourself the chance to play this game. Whether it's on the Wii, the new 3DS, a download from the Wii U eShop, or if you're opting to experience the game for yourself in HD on the Switch, please do whatever you can to experience it in some way. I guarantee this is a game you'll find special. A journey I can't recommend enough to embark on.
And now for me to prove what I said at the top of the video, or maybe disprove depending on how much you like my voice, I'm going to read to you my grocery list. 3 boxes of penne pasta. 2 jars of pasta sauce. 1 box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. 1 dozen eggs. 6 gallons of milk. 1 more gallon of milk, in case the rest of the family wants some. 1 bunch of bananas. However many pizzas can fit into a shopping cart. 1 pound of ground beef. 2 blocks of cheddar cheese. 1 bottle of buffalo hot sauce. 1 gallon of Dark Souls. Chocolate milk. 12-pack of Spotted Cow. 3 gallons of milk.